Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to show you a do-it-yourself mini 5-inch tall lantern stained glass style. Now this is a very small lantern. So number one, I'm going to prepare the units. As you can see, it's a little wire lantern that I bought online. And first of all, because it's an alloy metal that won't take solder easily, I am wrapping every piece of metal with some copper foil. Now I'm using 7/32 inch black backed copper foil. You don't have to use that. Any copper foil should work just fine as long as it sticks well. After you wrap it, you need to make sure you burnish it down thoroughly. So this is the foil that I'm using. Now for the glass, I am cutting my black backed foil in that's 7/32 inch wide, and I'm cutting it in half so it's narrower. I'm using very small, they're called ultra thin glass. And this glass is, I have measurements in a few minutes, but it's a lot smaller than your normal mosaic tiles. So these are really thin pieces of glass, and it'll help make this little tiny lantern lightweight. So I am foiling it like you would normally foil regular flat stained glass work. So you want to go from one side to another and pinch and crease at the corners so that you get nice corners. And then you're going to want to burnish down. So you're going to want to press down the foil and try as you're pressing it down to kind of straighten it up so it's as sharp edges as it possibly can be and as symmetrical as it can be. Now sometimes I've had to go around the pieces more than once to try to straighten them out because maybe one wasn't, either the foil wasn't cut perfectly or I didn't wrap it as nicely as I'd like to. So as you can see, let me turn my ruler around to the centimeters. So one side is like less of one of these rhombus is less than 1 centimeter, and they're just a little bit more than 1 millimeter thick. So normal stained glass is more like 3 millimeters. And I have another regular mosaic tile to compare it to in a few minutes. But so right now I'm doing triangles. As you can see, you can get these in all different colors, and you can get them in triangles or rhombus or leaf shapes. At least that's what I found so far. I've gotten these on Temu. But maybe you can get them other places at different times. Right now, they're the only place that I can find these ultra thin, really lightweight pieces of glass. Now, unfortunately, most of the ones that I've gotten are not truly colored glass. They are painted. See, that's about 1 centimeter long for one of the sides, and this is one of the leaf shaped. So you don't want to scratch the glass because they're actually, some of them are actually painted, not just a pure like purple glass shaped into this leafy shape. They're stained somehow, which unfortunately some glass you do get that's not actually dyed in the glass itself. So if you chip it or scrape it, it's going to show the scrape, which isn't really what you want. So this is your normal mosaic tile. And as you can see, they're more like about 15 millimeters and about 3 millimeters thick, whereas the little one, the thinner one, is a lot smaller. Now I'm making a little board to put this on. I'm using some of that foam that you can get when you buy things, and using a silicone piece and some paper and a board to put behind it, and I'm sandwiching them all together. So what I did right there is you saw that I traced out all the pieces that I need to cut and put it under the silicone. And now I'm going to be able to stab into this board to help hold parts of it together while I'm soldering. Now I have all these little pieces and I'm playing with them and trying to make little patterns for what I'm going to solder. I ended up using pieces of silicone and some thumbtacks, some pins and push pins to hold the silicone strips as like barriers around, as you can see right there, barriers around my triangles to help keep them in place as I was soldering. So basically, finally, I had all my little pieces and I would put them in the triangles that I have already drawn up and then solder them together. Now, as you can see, they're kind of messy before you clean them. Right now, I am tinning the foil that I wrapped around my little baby frame. Now, the reason I am actually pre-tinning everything is that these pieces of glass are so ultra teeny that if you heat them up very much, the foil will definitely just kind of slip off them. And you don't want that. You want them to stay together. So you're going to have to pre-tin stuff so that your soldering is as quick as possible. So as you can see, I'm using flux. Now, right now, I'm using gel flux. I did order some liquid flux, which I haven't really liked liquid flux in the past because it's so watery. But I am going to try it with these small pieces of glass because perhaps it would be a good thing to use the liquid flux because the gel flux is a bit thick to use on such small pieces. It seems to overwhelm them. So that's what I'm going to be trying next. But right now I have only the gel flux that I usually use. And I am tinning everything. So I'm not washing the pieces until I have a break or I'm done. So that's why it still looks kind of cruddy and soldery. I'm using some little clamps to hold them in place. And as you notice, my triangles are a little bit small compared to my frame. I guess I could have made them a little bit bigger, but I wanted definitely to have them fit. So this is what I did. So I'm holding it as securely as I can with these little clips. And now I'm just kind of like tack soldering the corners. And as you saw when I was doing the soldering of the little triangle design, I did tack solder all the little pieces together first before I tried to connect them all. I also have ordered some new solder that melts at a really low temperature, and I'm hoping that might work better for these little teeny pieces because I won't have to heat them up as much. So we'll see in my next project when all this comes in. So right now I'm filling the little gap between the triangle of shapes and my frame to complete that part of the little frame that I made. Here's another little area that I have it's all ready to solder. So first of all, I'm adding some flux to it, and see, you can see that my flux is a little overpowering for the size of the shapes. And right now I am dropping pieces of solder onto the shapes just to hold them in place because I don't want them to go anywhere. They do tend to, because the solder tends to get on the other side of them when I'm soldering, they do kind of curl up a little bit. It's hard to keep them really flat, even when I use tweezers to help hold them down. So that's a kind of a tricky thing with these little teeny weeny pieces. So after I tack them all down, I'm now trying to solder them all together and fill the little gaps that I did create between the designs. Because as you can see, I do have some little holes, which in a design this little, they seem like huge holes, but they really aren't very big. They're just small little gaps between them. Now, obviously, this project, I decided to limit myself to a color palette of purples and blues. So you don't have to do that. You can use, obviously, whatever colors you want, but, that's up to you. Now, this one, you can see there's quite a large gap in places. Now, there are times when I would fill these gaps between the frame and the glass triangle with a piece of wire to help fill the gap before I filled it with solder. So that's up to you. It's a lot easier to do that than to try to get solder to connect from one piece to another. But in reality, these gaps really aren't that big. It's just that this project is so teeny that they look like really big gaps. Using these clips that I'm showing really makes it easier to hold it together, because unless you have some other kind of clips, you're dealing with only two hands usually, unless you have an assistant to help hold stuff, and it really helps to have something to hold it at the beginning when you start soldering a couple pieces together. So you can see that even with just solder, you can fill the gaps pretty easily if you want to. So these are 3 more areas that I am getting ready to solder. So right now I'm kind of like dribbling on some flux onto all of them. The one on the top right hand side there has a wire around it, that copper wire that I bent in a triangle that's around that area. That's going to actually be the door, because I wanted a door kind of to open so that I could put the lights on the inside and then shut the little door and have have LED lights inside of it, but not have a big hole in it. So I made a little door that's going to shut. So I used the little circles, as you can see, and the triangles and rhombus shaped diamonds to fill these areas. And you can see some areas do have bigger gaps than others. I even took wire nippers and cut some of the shapes in half. So there's sometimes where I took a rhombus shape and cut it in half and made 2 smaller triangles. And I know that makes for a very small triangle, but it did help to fill the shapes. So when I had a gap, I didn't have such a big gap to fill with solder. I didn't want to use too much flux doing this, because I didn't want the areas to heat up a lot, because obviously, as we talked about before, if it heats up too much, it might make the foil pop off. So yeah, it looks like I heated that whole area up a lot, but I actually, it's only like the top layer of the foil. It's not like heated all the way down and to the other side. So it worked out fine. Now this is the door I talked to you about. As you can see, I have little wire wrapped around the edge there and 2 little loops. So I'm going to have 2 little loops that are going to be used as my hinge to hold everything together. I did have one of these round shapes pop off at one point, and I had to put a whole new one in. But besides that, I was pretty lucky with keeping the foil on the triangles and rhombus shapes. Now, most of this video is sped up to about 4 or 8 times real life, so it really took longer in real life to do this than what I'm showing you, but it gets kind of boring to watch it that slow, so I did speed it up. So now I am holding it together again with this piece, and you might have noticed that each area that I've done has a different pattern to it, and that's because I don't like repeating myself. Most of the time when I'm doing things like this, I like to have some kind of change in each side. So yes, I'm using the same colors and the same shapes basically, but I am mixing it up so each side of my little mini lantern will be slightly different. Now, when you're trying to fill in a gap that you need to add some solder to, so again, you can put a coil of wire in that, which would help fill that gap, or you can use a glob of solder and then let it cool a little bit and come back to that area, and you'll be able to, just by heating up just a little bit of the area, fill it with solder. So you don't want to try to do it all at once, because if you heat it up too much, the solder will just fall through. Right now I'm trying to smooth out areas. So I went over the whole project and tried to smooth out, fill gaps, fill holes, make it as smooth and even looking as I could, which isn't very even, because these pieces are so tiny, and you're dealing with lots and lots of pieces, tiny pieces. I wasn't very successful in making it terribly smooth, but I did go through the whole thing and try to smooth down areas at times. So this is the door, and I'm just looking at it to make sure it fits. As you notice, I did make that area a little bit bigger than some of those others because I did want it to overlap. And here is some of the project without the door added, but you can see the inside, and actually the inside looks almost better than the outside at times. But anywho, now I put little, I used tinned wire to begin with, about 20 gauge, and made a little coil of it and wrapped it around the little loops that I used for my hinge. And now I'm trying to encourage solder to stick to the little tinned loopy guy that I made for my hinge. And yeah, it took a little bit. Now I didn't want it to have too much solder because I didn't want to just make it so that it's no longer a free-flowing hinge. I just wanted to attach that one part of the loop, which did work out fine. Now I need to spray with black patina and add the lights, and I end up with my adorable little lantern. And I think it came out really cute. It is very, very small. So 5 inches is the total from the tip of the loop at the top to the base. So most of it is within a 4-inch area. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.